3 years into her career, Chidinma had never once been assigned a case based on anything other than merit, until the Monday she counted 4 in a row with Tayang's name typed directly beneath hers, and realized with a cold, creeping certainty that something had quietly shifted without her permission. The email notification blinked on her screen at 8:47 a.m., innocuous white text on a gray background, and it took her exactly 4 seconds to notice the pattern and another 4 to convince herself she was imagining it. The file was assigned to her. Chidinma Okonkwo, by Tayang Kim. Again. Welcome to my channel. If you've ever caught feelings for the coworker who remembers your coffee order without asking, and you're enjoying the story so far, drop a comment below and tell me the time and city you're watching from. Subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. The firm's 42nd floor caught the morning light in long gold bars that sliced across the glass partitions, warming the cold marble underfoot, and Chidinma was already 3 coffees deep by the time Taeyang appeared at her office door, a 4th cup already in his hand, extended toward her like an offering. "Oat milk, 1 pump of vanilla, extra hot." He set it down before she could refuse it. "Don't say I never do anything for you. I didn't ask for that. You never do. That's what makes it a gift and not a transaction." He leaned against her doorframe, arms crossed, that easy half-smile on his face that had disarmed opposing counsel and senior partners alike for the better part of a decade. "You're welcome, by the way. I didn't say thank you. You were about to. I could see it forming." She rolled her eyes, but her fingers had already curled around the cup, and the warmth of it, of him remembering, again, exactly how she took it after 3 years of never once writing it down, settled somewhere in her chest. She didn't have the bandwidth to examine at 8:52 in the morning. "You put me on the Hendricks deposition," she said, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Again. You're good at depositions. I'm good at depositions in general. Priya is also good at depositions. Priya has, in fact, done the last 4 Hendricks depositions with you, and suddenly this week it's me. The client likes continuity. The client has met me twice. Exactly. Continuity." He said it with the particular straight-faced confidence of a man who knew the excuse was thin and was daring her to call it what it was. "Also, your cross-examination style is sharper, more instinctive. Priya reads from notes. You actually listen to the witness. That's flattering." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "It's also not an answer. It's the only answer I've got." He straightened off the doorframe, and for just a fraction of a second, brief enough that she'd later wonder if she'd imagined it, something more careful moved behind his expression, something that wasn't quite banter anymore. Then it was gone, tucked back behind the easy grin. "Prep starts at 10. Bring the coffee. Consider it payment." He left before she could push further, footsteps unhurried down the hallway, and Chidinma sat there a moment longer than necessary, turning the cup slowly in her hands, telling herself very firmly that this meant absolutely nothing. The file room was cold in the particular way of rooms kept at 62 degrees to protect paper rather than people, fluorescent light buzzing faintly overhead, casting everything in flat, clinical white. Chidinma reached for the Hendricks folder on the top shelf at the exact moment Taeyang reached for the same one from the other side, and their hands landed together on the manila edge, fingers overlapping, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin against hers. Neither of them moved. A beat passed. Then another, longer than either of them could account for later. "You can have it," he said, voice lower than it needed to be for the sentence he was saying. "I know I can have it. It's my case too." "Right." He didn't let go. Obviously. Her heart was doing something inconvenient and rapid against her ribs, and she hated it, hated the sudden narrowness of the space between them, hated the way the fluorescent light seemed to catch the sharp line of his jaw, in a way she'd apparently never noticed in 3 years of standing exactly this close to him, in exactly this room. She pulled the folder free, finally, a half-second too slow to look casual about it. "You're being weird," she said. "I'm always weird. You've just never called it out before. I'm calling it out now." "Noted." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach the easy carelessness of his usual grin. Something more deliberate underneath it. Something she couldn't name and didn't trust herself to try. "I'll work on being less weird." "Please do." She left the file room first, walking faster than the situation strictly required, coffee cup abandoned somewhere behind her, chest tight in a way she chose very deliberately not to examine. "You know people are talking, right?" Nkechi said it without looking up from her laptop, casual as a comment about the weather, and Chidinma's pen stopped moving mid-signature. "Talking about what?" "You and Tayang." Nkechi finally glanced up, eyebrows raised just slightly. "How often you two end up on the same cases lately?" "Someone in the mailroom made a whole comment about it yesterday. Said it's basically a running joke on this floor at this point." "It's not." Chidinma stopped herself, recalibrated, tried again with more control than she felt. "We work well together. That's all this is." "Sure." Nkechi's tone carried absolutely no conviction whatsoever. "That's definitely all this is." "It is." "Okay." Nkechi went back to her laptop, entirely too pleased with herself. "Just thought you should know people are noticing." Chidinma sat very still after Nkechi left, the office gone quiet around her. Late afternoon light slanting low and gold through the window blinds, striping across her desk in thin amber bars. She looked down at the case assignment still open on her screen, his name beneath hers, again for the 5th time in 2 weeks, and felt something shift low in her stomach that had nothing to do with professional curiosity and everything to do with a question she wasn't ready to ask out loud. What if this isn't just about the cases at all? She closed the laptop more sharply than necessary and told herself, not for the first time that week, and certainly not for the last, that she was reading far too much into all of it. She did not, notably, manage to convince herself. By 10 p.m., the office had emptied out around them until it was just the two of them, a graveyard of takeout containers, and the particular golden hush that settled over the 42nd floor once the cleaning crew's vacuums fell silent for the night. "Read that line back to me," Taeyang said, feet propped on her coffee table, tie long since discarded somewhere over the back of her office chair. "The defendant's conduct constitutes a material breach." Chidinma didn't look up from the deposition binder balanced on her knees. "It's not complicated, Taeyang." "It's not complicated when you say it. When I say it, it sounds like I'm reading a parking ticket. That's a you problem. Everything's a me problem tonight, apparently." He reached for his wine glass, and the low lamplight caught the curve of his smile, warm and unguarded in a way the fluorescence upstairs never allowed. "You've corrected my cadence 4 times, because you keep putting the emphasis on the wrong word. It's material breach, not material breach. The jury needs to hear the weight land in the right place. Say it again." "Why?" "Because you're annoyingly good at this, and I like watching you do it." He said it easily, like it cost him nothing, but something flickered behind his eyes that suggested it had cost him exactly the amount of nerve required to say it out loud at all. Chidinma looked at him a beat too long before looking back down at the binder, unwilling to examine why her pulse had picked up over a sentence that should have meant nothing. The knock came soft against her open door. Priya's junior associate, Daniel, 2 glasses of gala champagne into his evening, and considerably looser than office hours generally allowed. "Didn't mean to interrupt." He grinned, swaying slightly. "Just grabbing my charger. You two are always here." "Some of us have work ethic," Taeyang said. "Some of us have gossip, apparently." Daniel laughed, entirely too pleased with himself. "Everyone's still talking about that bet from the partner gala, by the way. The one about the new hire? Feels like ancient history now, but Marcus brought it up again at drinks last week like it just happened." Chidinma laughed along on reflex, distracted, already 3 lines back into her binder. "People need better hobbies." "Truly," Daniel agreed, retrieved his charger, and wandered back out into the hallway humming something off-key. The conversation moved on. The wine kept flowing. The night stayed warm and easy and unremarkable. It was nearly midnight, alone in her apartment, makeup half off and toothbrush in hand, when the sentence replayed itself in her head with sudden, sickening clarity. The bet from the partner gala, the one about the new hire. She set the toothbrush down slowly. She had started at the firm the same year as that gala. She had, in fact, been the new hire that season, the only one in her practice group, hired mid-cycle, still finding her footing when Taeyang had first started buying her coffee she never remembered ordering. She stood very still in her bathroom, fluorescent light unflattering and harsh overhead, staring at her own reflection, while something cold worked its way slowly down her spine. She was waiting outside his office at 7:40 the next morning, before either of them had touched coffee, arms crossed, expression carefully composed into something that gave away considerably less than she felt. Tayang. He looked up, and something in her tone made him set his pen down immediately. What's wrong? Was there a bet? Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not as steady as her voice. At the partner gala, about me. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough to answer the question before he said a single word. Yes. He didn't look away, didn't reach for an excuse. There was. Her stomach dropped anyway, even having already known. I made a stupid bet with Marcus, months before I actually knew you. Before any of this, he gestured loosely between them. Before any of this was real. I don't even remember the exact terms anymore. Something about whether I could get the new hire to go out with me. It was arrogant and thoughtless, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend it wasn't. And then I actually started talking to you. His voice had dropped, quieter, more careful. And within a few weeks it stopped being a bet and started being... He stopped himself, jaw tight, like the next words cost him something. It started being the only interesting part of my week. You were sharper than everyone else in the room, and you never once needed my help, and it made me want to earn your attention instead of just assuming I already had it. I forgot about the bet completely. I should have told you the second that happened. I didn't, because I was a coward, and I'm sorry. Chidinma studied him for a long moment, searching his face for the deflection she'd braced herself for, and finding, instead, nothing but plain, uncomfortable honesty. That's humiliating, she said finally. Extremely. For you. Deeply. Permanently humiliating. Yes. Something in her chest loosened despite itself. She didn't fully understand how they ended up back in her office that night, jackets abandoned somewhere near the door, the city lights spilling gold and diffused through the window blinds, but she understood, with total clarity, that she'd stopped resisting it somewhere around the third time he made her laugh. You bet on me, she murmured against his jaw, more amused than she wanted to admit. Worst decision of my life. His hands were unhurried, careful, like he still couldn't quite believe he was allowed. Best accident I've ever made. You're an idiot. A humbled idiot. She laughed, low and warm, tangled against him on the couch in the dim office light. 3 years of careful distance finally, thoroughly collapsing. If you ever bet on me again, she said, breath uneven. I want better odds next time. Ivy, he murmured, caught himself. Chidinma. A soft laugh against her skin. You already won. 2 weeks in, they'd gotten sloppy about it, and Chidinma knew it even as she let it happen. His hand finding the small of her back in the elevator when they thought no one else was riding down with them. The particular charge that crackled across conference tables when their eyes met a beat too long during depositions. The way she'd started biting back a smile every time he said opposing counsel, in that dry, deliberate voice he knew drove her crazy. It wasn't subtle. It had stopped being subtle days ago. She knew that. She just hadn't cared enough yet to fix it. Beaumont's office fixed it for her. The managing partner's office sat on the corner of the 44th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, city sprawling gray and indifferent below. He didn't ask her to sit. That, more than anything, told her exactly how this conversation was going to go. Chidinma. Beaumont didn't look up from the file in front of him immediately, which felt deliberate, a small display of whose time mattered more in this room. How's the Hendricks case progressing? On track. We file the motion Thursday. Good. He finally looked up. His expression was mild, pleasant, entirely unreadable. The specific calm of a man who had spent 30 years learning that pressure applied gently left no fingerprints. I wanted to check in, actually, about something separate from the filings. Her stomach tightened. Of course. Personal entanglements. He said it lightly, almost conversationally, like he was commenting on the weather. They make the firm nervous on cases of this size. Not because anyone's done anything wrong, you understand. Simply optics, perception. The client's counsel is watching everything right now, and perception has a way of becoming reality faster than we'd like. I'm not sure I follow. She followed completely. She kept her voice level anyway. I think you do. His tone didn't sharpen. It didn't need to. I'd hate for anything to complicate a case this important. And if something did need to be restructured before verdict, he let the sentence trail, deliberately unfinished, the silence doing the work his mouth declined to. Well, Tayang's name is already on the partnership track this cycle. I'm sure you understand which direction restructuring tends to go in situations like that. The room went very still. Chidinma's pulse was loud in her own ears, her hands cold despite the warm light pooling gold across Beaumont's desk. Understood, she said, because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't cost her more than she could afford to lose. Good talk. He'd already looked back down at his file. Close the door on your way out. She spent the rest of the day building a wall, brick by careful brick, and told herself it was the only responsible choice available to her. You've barely looked at me since lunch, Tayang said, catching her in the hallway outside the copy room, voice low enough not to carry. Did I do something? I'm just busy. She didn't stop walking. Big case, you remember. Chidinma. I have a call in 10 minutes. He caught her arm. Gently, not forceful, just enough to make her stop. You've never once brushed me off like this in 3 years of actual friendship, and you're doing it now, 4 weeks into whatever this is. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. Her voice was clipped, controlled, entirely too controlled, the kind of controlled that gave away exactly how uncontrolled she felt underneath it. I need to focus on the case. That's not it, and we both know it. His jaw tightened. Did something happen? I said I'm fine. You keep saying that like it's going to start being true. She pulled her arm free and kept walking, and he let her go, but she felt his eyes on her back the entire length of the hallway, and hated, more than anything, how much she wanted to turn around. He found her an hour later in the emergency stairwell between the 42nd and 43rd floors, the one nobody used, all cold concrete and buzzing fluorescent light, the door swinging shut behind him with a heavy metallic clang that echoed up the narrow shaft. Beaumont called you in. It wasn't a question. I saw you leave his office yesterday. I should have asked sooner. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. What did he say to you? It doesn't matter. It clearly matters, because you've spent an entire day looking through me like I'm furniture. His voice had an edge now, not anger exactly, something closer to hurt, trying very hard to disguise itself as frustration. Tell me what he said. He said, her voice cracked slightly, and she hated it. Hated how thin her composure had actually been this whole day. He said if anyone gets reassigned before verdict, it's not going to be you, because your name's already on the partnership track, and mine isn't on anything yet, because I'm 3 years in, and you're the safe bet, and I'm the... She stopped herself, throat tight. I've spent my entire career making sure nobody could say I got anywhere because of anything other than my own work. And now there's a version of this where I lose everything I built because of 4 weeks with you. So your solution was to just... He gestured between them, sharp, frustrated. Disappear? Pull away and not tell me why? Let me think I did something? I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to hold his eyes, close enough that the cold stairwell air suddenly felt entirely beside the point. I'm not choosing the firm's comfort over you. Not now. Not ever. If someone's going to get reassigned off this case to make Beaumont feel better about optics, it's going to be me, because I'd rather lose the partnership track than lose you over something we didn't even do wrong. Tayang, I mean it. His hand came up, gentle against her jaw, and his voice dropped lower, rougher. I've spent 3 years being careful with you because I didn't want to lose the best thing in my life to a bad decision. I'm not about to lose you to somebody else's discomfort instead. The space between them collapsed entirely. His mouth found hers, urgent and certain in a way that erased an entire day of careful distance in a matter of seconds, her hands fisting in his shirt, his palm flat and warm against the cold concrete wall behind her. The stairwell's harsh fluorescent light, the least romantic setting either of them could have picked, and somehow entirely beside the point. We're late, she murmured, breathless, several extremely satisfying minutes later, for the Hendricks call. I'm aware. He didn't look remotely sorry about it, straightening his tie with visibly unsteady hands. She laughed, a real one, startled out of her, and smoothed her blouse, cheeks warm, pulse still racing. Beaumont's going to know something's different the second we walk in there. Let him wonder. He caught her hand before she could reach for the door, lacing his fingers through hers, steady and sure. Actually, let's not let him wonder at all. She looked at him. "Let's go tell him ourselves," he said. "Before Marcus or the gossip mill or anyone else gets to define this before we do." She held his gaze a long moment, heart still unsteady, and then nodded once. They walked out of the stairwell together, hands still linked, and headed straight for Beaumont's office instead of the conference room. 11 minutes late for the Hendricks call, and neither of them remotely sorry about it. The article was live before either of them made it to the elevator. Conflict of interest? Sources say, firm star litigators are more than colleagues ahead of major verdict. Chidinma read it standing in the middle of the 42nd floor at 7:52 in the morning, phone screen throwing pale light up across her face, the bullpen around her already buzzing with the particular electric hush of an office that had collectively decided to pretend it wasn't reading the same thing. "They're calling it calculated," she said, voice flat, disbelieving. "Like we planned this. Like the entire relationship exists to manipulate the verdict." "I know." Tayang's jaw was tight. His own phone clutched hard enough that his knuckles had gone pale. "Marcus, it has to be. Nobody else benefits from this timing." Beaumont's office door opened down the hall before either of them could say another word, and the managing partner's expression, controlled, furious, entirely too calm for how much danger radiated off him, told Chidinma everything she needed to know about how the next hour was going to go. "The client is rattled." Beaumont didn't sit. Neither did they. The corner office felt smaller than usual, morning light flat and cold through the windows, none of its usual golden warmth. Opposing counsel is already drafting a motion to disqualify, based on undisclosed conflict of interest. If this goes the way Marcus wants it to go, we lose the case on a technicality days before closing arguments, after months of work, over something that has nothing to do with the merits. "The relationship hasn't affected the case," Chidinma said, steady despite the ice in her chest. "Every filing, every strategy decision, every hour of work, that's not the point right now." Beaumont's voice sharpened for the first time. "The point is optics, and the optics are currently catastrophic." Tayang stepped forward before she could respond. "Take me off the case." Chidinma turned to look at him so fast her neck ached. "What?" "I'll step off publicly, formally, today." He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on Beaumont, voice steady in the way he got when he'd already decided something and was daring anyone to talk him out of it. "It clears the conflict of interest argument, it protects the verdict, and it protects Chidinma's reputation from being the one people assume compromised the case." "No." The word came out of her sharp and immediate, cutting through the room. "Absolutely not. Chidinma, you are not falling on a sword to protect me from a headline you didn't write." Her voice was rising now, something raw underneath the fury. "We built this case together. If one of us steps off, it's not going to be because you decided unilaterally, in front of Beaumont, without asking me first, like I'm something fragile that needs shielding. I'm trying to protect what you've built. By deciding for me? That's not protection. That's exactly what Beaumont already tried to do to me 3 weeks ago." The room went silent. Beaumont, to his credit, said nothing, watching the two of them with the careful stillness of a man recalculating in real time. "We'll reconvene at 4, he said finally. "Figure out your positions before then. Separately if you have to." They didn't speak again until they were both back in her apartment that night, case files spread across her coffee table, coffee gone cold in mugs neither of them had touched in an hour, the city lights outside her window a blur of indifferent gold against full dark. "I wasn't trying to make you feel small," Tayang said finally, breaking the silence, voice quieter than it had been all day. "This morning, I panicked. I saw the whole thing collapsing, and my first instinct was just, get you out of the blast radius, whatever it costs me." "I know that's what you meant." Chidinma didn't look up from the file in front of her, hands twisting together in her lap. "It still felt like you deciding my career wasn't worth fighting for as hard as yours." "That's not—" He stopped, exhaled hard, tried again. "That's not what I think. At all. I think you're the best litigator on that floor, including me, and the idea of your name getting dragged through this because of something I started with a stupid bet, months before any of it meant anything. I couldn't sit there and let that happen without trying to stop it. I don't need you to stop things for me." Her voice cracked slightly. "I need you to stand next to me while we stop them together. That's the whole point, Tayang. That's what this is supposed to be." He was quiet a long moment, watching her, something raw and unguarded moving across his face in the low lamplight. "I'm scared," he said finally, plain and unpolished, none of his usual easy confidence in it. "I don't do this. Being scared of losing something. I've never wanted to protect anything enough to be scared like this before you." Something in her chest cracked open entirely at that, the anger draining out of her all at once. "I'm scared too," she admitted quietly. "I've spent 3 years making sure nothing could ever be used against me, and now there's a headline calling our relationship calculated, and some part of me is terrified I let myself want something, and it's going to cost me everything I worked for. It's not going to. You don't know that." "No." He reached for her hand, steady despite everything. "But I know that whatever happens with the case tomorrow, I'm not walking away from you. Not for Beaumont, not for Marcus, not for a headline. This stopped being about a bet a long time ago. This is real, Chidinma. You're real, and I would rather lose the case than lose this." She looked at him for a long moment, then closed the distance between them slowly, deliberately, no urgency left in it, just certainty, warm and unhurried, his hand coming up to cradle her jaw like she was something he'd already decided he wasn't letting go of. "Okay?" she whispered against his mouth. "Okay? Okay. Tomorrow, we walk in together. Whatever happens, happens to both of us." They stayed tangled together long after the case files went ignored, the coffee went untouched, and the city outside dimmed slowly toward morning. No more urgency, no more fear, just the quiet, solid certainty of two people who'd finally stopped being scared of wanting the same thing. At dawn, they walked into the firm together, hands linked, unified, ready to face whatever the day decided to throw at them. Beaumont's office looked exactly the same as it had the morning the article broke. Same cold light, same skyline sprawling indifferent below. But Chidinma walked in this time without a single ounce of the fear that had gripped her the last time she'd stood on this side of his desk. "We're not here to deny anything," she said, before he could speak first. "We're here to tell you the truth, and then to tell you how we fix this." "Ton 2-4 thing." Beaumont raised an eyebrow slightly, said nothing, gestured for them to continue. "The relationship is real," Tayang said. "It started after a genuinely stupid bet I made months ago, before either of us had feelings involved, and it became something else entirely once I actually got to know her. None of that has touched a single strategic decision on this case. Every filing, every hour of prep, every argument, that's us at our best, not us compromised. We're proposing a restructure," Chidinma added, sliding a single page across the desk. "Transparent division of responsibilities for closing arguments, documented, on the record, reviewed by whoever the firm wants to review it. No hiding anything. If Marcus wants to argue conflict of interest, let him argue it against a paper trail that shows exactly how airtight this case actually is." Beaumont studied the page for a long moment. The room held still, morning light flat and businesslike, none of the previous week's chaos. "You're aware this is a significant risk," he said finally. "We're aware," Tayang said. "We'd rather take the risk honestly than win by pretending the relationship doesn't exist and have it blow up worse later." Beaumont looked between the two of them for a long moment, weighing something behind his carefully composed expression. Then finally he nodded, reluctant but genuine. "Don't make me regret this." The courtroom felt different that final day, sharper, charged, the particular electricity of a case reaching its conclusion. Marcus's motion to disqualify had been denied that morning on the strength of the restructured filing, and his conflict of interest argument, stripped of its scandal and left with nothing but the actual facts, had nowhere left to hide. Chidinma stood for closing arguments, voice steady and clear, dismantling months of opposing counsel's strategy, point by point, with the same instinctive precision that had made Taeyang request her on cases in the first place. He watched her from the table, jaw tight with something that wasn't nerves, pride, plain and unguarded, impossible to hide even in a room full of people who'd spent the last week speculating about exactly what he felt for her. The verdict came back clean, decisive. Nothing about undisclosed conflicts, nothing about compromised judgment, just a win, built on the actual merits, precisely as they'd promised Beaumont it would be. Marcus's leak, in the end, looked exactly like what it had always been, a desperate man reaching for anything but the law. That evening, after the celebratory drinks had thinned out and the associates had drifted home, Tayang took her hand and led her out of the bar without explanation, into a car, across the city, until they were standing in front of the same ballroom where all of this had started. The gala venue was empty now, dim, the chandeliers dark except for a scattering of low amber sconces along the walls, the space holding a hushed, expectant quiet that felt entirely different from the glittering chaos it had held the night of the bet. "What are we doing here?" Chidinma asked, voice softened by the strange cathedral hush of the room. "I wanted to come back." Taeyang's hands were in his pockets, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something almost nervous cross his face. "The last time we were both in this room, I was standing exactly there." He nodded toward the far end, near the grand doors, "making the stupidest bet of my entire life. Pointing at a door like an idiot, certain I already knew everything about how the night was going to go." "You did know how the night was going to go," she said. "You just had no idea what it would actually mean. No idea at all." He stepped closer, the low amber light catching the sharp line of his jaw, softer here than it ever looked under fluorescence. "Everything about that night was arrogance, Chidinma. I want you to know I know that. But everything since, the depositions, the file room, the stairwell, tonight, that's been the realest thing I've ever felt in my life. Not a bet, not a game, just you." She laughed, quiet and warm, shaking her head. "You are so ridiculous." "I know, truly, embarrassingly ridiculous. I'm aware." He held out his hand anyway, entirely unbothered by the teasing, something steady and certain in his eyes. "Dance with me. There's no music. There doesn't need to be." She took his hand. They moved slowly across the empty ballroom floor, badly, off any real rhythm, her laughter echoing soft against the high ceilings, his hand warm at the small of her back, exactly the way it had learned to find her, without thinking over the last several weeks. No audience, no bet, no case to win or headline to outmaneuver, just the two of them, entirely unbothered by who might be watching, because for the first time since that ridiculous night months ago, there was nothing left to prove to anyone. "For the record," she murmured against his shoulder, "you owe Marcus nothing. But you owe me an apology dance for at least the next decade. I can commit to that." "Good." She pulled back just enough to look at him, something soft and unguarded in her expression that she'd spent 3 years too careful to let show. "Because I'm not going anywhere either." He kissed her then, slow and sure, no urgency left in it, just certainty. The particular, hard-won quiet of two people who had circled each other for years before finally landing exactly where they were always going to end up. Not a bet, not a rumor, just theirs.